This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Lenovo ThinkPad T490S. We already reviewed the T490 not so long ago, and the T490 has gotten so slim and light as a 14-inch slim and light business laptop goes. I kind of thought, do we still need a T490S? Well, when I felt this, when it arrived, and I was like, is there anything in the box? I could actually still see the point of a T490S. And yes, there is a Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon now hitting the 7th generation that we'll be reviewing soon. That is even thinner, even lighter, and more expensive, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to help you decide which of these could be for you now. This is an Intel 8th generation Whiskey Lake refresh for the ThinkPad, so that means quad-core 15-watt Ultrabook CPUs inside. So the idea with the T490S is it's a slim and light business 14-inch laptop that doesn't compromise on keyboard or ports, at least not much. Compared to a lot of thin and light laptops that are out there these days that have almost no key travel, this one has a luxurious usual ThinkPad keyboard. Granted, it's not as deep as something like a P-series thick workstation keyboard, but it still has great tactile feel. It's lovely to type on. And in terms of ports, you've got things like HDMI, USB-A, Thunderbolt 3, micro SD card slot, not too bad, and the proprietary Ethernet port. Really, the Ethernet is built into the ThinkPad. It's just a dongle adapter or a terminator to RJ45, though you could also use USB-C if you wanted to. Yeah, so well done. It starts about $1,100. You can get it with 4G LTE. Always appreciate its Cat9 LTE. And there's a variety of displays here. So the base model starts around $1,100, which isn't too painful for a Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and 128 gig NVMe SSD. Most of you are going to want a bigger SSD, obviously. The display options are interesting here. You can get the new 400 nit, and it's a nice IPS panel, and that's the low power display. Something that we saw HP using first. Their 1-watt display panels save power, run it brighter without killing your battery life. Very nice. However, that's a $300 option, and that pushes this into the range of the X1 Carbon price. In fact, about the same if you configure them similarly. So, nice to have. Not sure that the people who are going to buy the T490S are going to go for that. It's probably more IT types that want to get their folks something pretty slim and pretty light, but not break the bank. The other options are a 250 nit Full HD display, and a 300 nit is also available, which is probably the one you want. 250 nit's kind of dim. They're all IPS, they're all Full HD, they're all non-touch, and they are truly matte. Sometimes Lenovo says anti-glare for their ThinkPads, and they're pretty darn shiny. This really is matte, so yay. Good times for that. Generationally speaking, it's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit lighter, the bezel is a little bit smaller compared to the T480S that it replaces. And the weight difference between the T490 and the T490S, well, you can see that on screen right now, it's noticeable. You'll feel it. I mean, is it enough for you to give up that Ethernet port, though, on the T490 and the full-size SD card slot instead of a micro SD card slot? That one's up to you as to which of those is more important to you. Also note, if you're looking at the T490, there is a touchscreen option, which isn't available on the T490S. When we look at the X1 Carbon, it's even thinner, it's even lighter, it's miraculous, and you're going to pay for it. But there are also more higher-end display options, like the WQHD higher resolution display, 500 nit, that sort of thing. So it's catering to a higher-end audience. If you want to go high with the display and really high, the X1 Carbon is it. Or the Yoga, if yogaing is your thing. In terms of durability, it may be thin, it may be light, but it is ThinkPad rugged. It passes a bunch of mil-spec tests, as always, for dust, shock, vibration, humidity, all that sort of stuff. And you've got the usual magnesium inner frame on this, which is quite rigid, and carbon fiber on the outside. Typically, I've had accidents and whoopsies with ThinkPads, and they really do well. So, good for that. It's a spill-resistant keyboard as well, and now I don't know if you're going to drop a whole bottle of beer on it, what's going to happen there, but you get a little water on the keyboard, it's supposed to be okay, according to Lenovo. We have a Microsoft Precision trackpad, and it's quite pleasant to use, and the usual eraser stick nav point pointer, and the keyboard has Lenovo's usual white backlighting actuated by the FN plus spacebar keys. So for security and business options, you have the usual DTPM 2.0. You have a fingerprint scanner that's available on the keyboard deck area. Windows Hello IR camera is available as an option, and you get the Think shutter, by the way. So it's a mechanical sliding switch over the webcam. I mean, obviously, you're physically blocking it when you do that, so it is secure if you're worried about people spying on you via the webcam. If you do want the Windows Hello IR camera, it is bundled with that 400 nit 1-watt low-power display. Also, there's a smart card reader for businesses that still use those. Speaking of that display, we do have the 1 watt 400 nit display, and yes, it does help with battery life. And yes, it is a good display. The contrast is good on this. The brightness is just about where Lenovo claims it, close enough. I have no complaints about this display. And the idea is you can actually drive it at higher brightness levels without really tanking your battery life, because a lot of IPS displays, you run them at 150 nits, things are good. You run them at 300 nits, they consume a lot more power. So say your typical display consumes 2 watts, this one consumes 1 watt, you're saving a lot of power these days for an Ultrabook, where we are talking low watt consumption overall for the unit. You only have the option of Intel UHD 620 graphics. There's no low-end DGPU option like NVIDIA MX250. If you want that, look elsewhere in Lenovo's line. Speaking of that battery life, again, we have the low power display. You have a 57 watt-hour battery, which is actually a little bit bigger than the 50 watt-hour battery in the T490. Go figure. Hey, I won't complain. And you have a 65 watt rapid charger, so you can get about 50% of your charge back in about 40 minutes or a little bit under. That's always appreciated. The charger is a USB-C based charger, and this has USB-C anti-fry protection on the motherboard itself, which is nice to have. Battery life has been really good for us, running it at 150 nits of brightness, doing mixed productivity, streaming some video, a little Photoshop, that sort of thing. I've seen it do about 9 hours on a charge, so that's very good, and that's without any draconian power management or anything like that, just letting it run on the balance mode with Wi-Fi on and active. You could probably stretch it if you tried, and I did notice that when we upped the brightness to 250 nits, battery life didn't really change all that much. It went down to about 8 hours or so, so that's great, because I mean, I do personally like to run my displays on the bright side, and now I don't have to worry so much about hurting the battery life. Speakers on this, you get 2 1-watt stereo speakers, and ThinkPads typically have surprisingly good speakers for business laptops, and it is pretty loud and it is pretty full. It's pleasant enough to watch YouTube videos, certainly. All right, to get inside, it's pretty darn easy. You've got 5 visible Phillips head screws. Notice the large ventilation area here. This helps keep this very thin laptop nice and chill. So take that cover off, and you'll see how it varies. This is more like the ThinkPad X390 motherboard here, how it varies from the T490, that is. So RAM is soldered on here. With the T490, you do get 1 RAM slot. Max RAM you can order this with is 16 gigs of DDR4 2400 megahertz RAM soldered on board. So the T490 can go up to, well, probably 40 gigs if you got a 32 gig module plus the 8 gigs soldered on. We do have the usual M.2 socketed NVMe SSD. The Wi-Fi card is soldered on. It's the Intel 9560 AC, which is standard for this platform. It's a good Wi-Fi card. You're probably not going to replace it. The WAN card, your 4G LTE, if you go for it, is socketed. It is optional, so here's the place where it would go. The antennas are pre-installed on our model. The fan is a good size, and that certainly helps. Now, this does not get hot to the touch, nor does it get loud when doing moderately demanding to demanding work, so which is typical of most Ultrabooks, except for some of the thin, completely metal-clad laptops that can get a little toasty. So no issues with the thermals here at all, or with the performance. We didn't see any thermal throttling. It performs well. So that's the Lenovo ThinkPad T490S, the in-between child between the X1 Carbon 7th generation and the T490. So now you see where it sits in the lineup, and certainly it does have a lot to offer. Particularly, it's, as ever, ThinkPad durable, so thin and so light, with no compromises to that keyboard, and a decent selection of ports plus Thunderbolt 3 to add anything that you didn't get in the first place in terms of the built-in ports. It's well done. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.